Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, Attorney Henry Gornvine. Today on Gracefully Graying, we will be discussing the topic of aging professionals in our changing world with Lisa Zastrow, who is a partner in the law firm of Lipson Neilson. Lisa, it's always a pleasure to have you on Gracefully Graying, and we're going to be talking about kind of an interesting topic that I fit into, and you're much younger, but someday you may fit into. But first of all, how has the practice of law changed in the last 10 years?
Good morning, Henry. Thank you for having me back. I'm not much younger. I just have a really dark hair dye. So my graceful graying is resisting the gray. So believe it or not, I've been practicing law for over 2 decades. So I've been in the workforce and I've seen lots of changes. So I feel qualified to discuss this topic with you. The difference between a 50-year-old and a 70-year-old is a much shorter gap than the distance between a 35-year-old and a 50-year-old. So to your question, how has the practice of law changed in the last 10 years? In a word, dramatically. Specifically, we're stating the obvious here, but technology has taken over the world and it's taken over the practice of law, just like many other professions, service industries, in various ways. We've talked about before the fact that you are in another state and I'm sitting in an office in Nevada, and we are, in a sense, conducting business, the business of making a video. But technology has really opened up a world of opportunities for professionals to service clients in various ways. We have now, 10 years ago, many legal documents would require a wet signature and a notary public. And now the courts and other administrative bodies have relaxed the rules, and we have systems called DocuSign. I'm not sure if you're familiar with DocuSign, but I'm currently in the process of buying a house, and we're signing documents left and right through email. So technology is, there are a lot of positives. Most people traditionally are resistant to change, but a lot of the technological changes have helped us become more efficient, and in a lot of ways, more lazy. I don't have to get into the car and drive down to an office to sign a document. But that's essentially, in technology, we utilize in our office through communications with clients, through managing documents, through communications with the courts. And as you know, I could talk about this for days.
Lisa, what about the impact of the pandemic?
Well, that's going to be studied, I think, for years to come. The short way to explain the impact of the pandemic on the profession is that the pandemic forced employers and even self-employed business owners, all of us came together, and we were required to figure out a way to go about our daily lives from home. And in a company with employees, the companies traditionally adapted by sending computers home with their employees, legal assistants in my field as a lawyer. All of the lawyers worked from home, and we were forced to figure it out. And I think, I'm not management necessarily, I'm a partner in my firm, but I have never been more impressed and proud of the way that our particular office stepped up. I always knew that that's what would happen. Some employers have the perception that if their employees don't have their, what I called AIS, ass in seat, that they were not going to be productive. And now that seat was just moved into their homes, and employers discovered that employees could be just as productive, and if not more. And there's lots of theories behind that. My personal one is that people are happy at home. They have their dogs, they have their cats, they have their own personal coffee mugs. And when they're happier, they put out more work and quality work. We have, as lawyers, we can do legal research online, and things were slow, but employers at the end of the year in 2020, of course, many of us, many companies received PPP loans. But even in spite of the downturn, employers recognized profitability, even having their employees at home. And that moved into 2021. And now many of us are never going to go back to the traditional method of being in an office. I'll certainly meet my clients in an office, but I'm just as productive as home. And even courts, it was very surreal at first to conduct hearings over video screens, but we were all forced to adapt. Even many of us who are older and don't understand technology, we figured it out. We're not idiots. We still have brains. So we're much more well-rounded now. And there are some downsides to what the pandemic has created, just in terms of forcing individuals to be separated from their colleagues. But
Lisa, would you say that the pandemic has accelerated the changes in our profession as well as other professions with regard to areas of work?
Accelerated it at breakneck speed. Many employers would say that they were progressive in allowing employees to work from home from time to time. But the pandemic forced all employers to allow their employees and to force their employees to work from home. So it accelerated that process. IT experts stepped up to the plate. They assisted employees who, in all professions, not just legal, brokers, physicians. I still do telemed appointments. And so employers, by not having a choice and sending those laptops and desktops home with their employees, accelerated is definitely a word, but without question, it accelerated the changes in a good way. Because some of us, old school, I did not personally like some of the programs and systems that we used, but now I use them daily and love them. They're efficient.
Great. Lisa, what about the 24-hour workday? I mean, we're home, we're kind of unchained, but we are accessible 24/7, I guess we could say.
That is a downside that I have wondered how that's going to impact the younger generation. I mean, you and I mean, we could theoretically retire sooner, but the negative impact of having technology at your fingertips 24 hours a day requires that if you're going to keep your sanity, you need to set some boundaries with clients. So some personalities, I'm not one of them, love having that 24-hour a day access. You wake up in the middle of the night, you look at your email and you see you've received an email from the East Coast. So you start working and they're unable to turn it off. And that can cause some real stress in the workplace. So yes, we are a 24-hour a day profession because we have computers, iPhones, clients now text message, and you have to set boundaries for your own sanity. And also, when you are working that hard and that much, the quality of the work declines, to be frank with you. So I set boundaries. I try to not answer my phone. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a psychological problem in the future. A good friend of mine's a therapist and her business is booming. So I think, those of us that are a little bit older and wiser, we're more capable of setting those boundaries.
That's a good point. Lisa, what about the impact of social media where anything can blow up in an instance? I mean, it's crazy. And social media is a good thing, but it's also a very scary thing.
It's scary on a number of levels. It can be a distraction. Number one, if you are trying to focus on a task at hand and whatever it is that your profession is, we happen to be lawyers. If I'm working on a document and then all of a sudden Russia invades Ukraine, that is a news cycle, but it overlaps with social media these days. So it can be a distraction. But the social media now, clients, they all have access to social media. And I've said this in the sense of protecting your boundaries and protecting yourself. It's my advice to anyone, whether you're a real estate agent or an attorney or what have you, that you should have, if you have any social media at all, it should be a private account. If you want to use social media to advertise your business or to post helpful tips and articles and legal opinions, have a separate social media account for that, because you don't want to, with this 24-hour day work cycle, you don't want to be at home on a Friday night after drinking a bottle of wine and at 9 o'clock decide to send a tweet out that says, something that is innocuous. And then your client 1,000 miles away sees it and doesn't agree with your politics or your sense of humor. And that's a good way to be misjudged. So it's just wise to create boundaries even with your social media. But so many situations I have seen where clients, even colleagues, there are lawyer groups. In Nevada, there's a Las Vegas mom group. And I don't even post in there because I don't want someone to judge something that I have to say. So you have to be cautious and conscientious. And for young adults, and I mean 20s and 30s, they seem to have that filter. And
Right.
I'm concerned for some that, and now, as you know, with cancel culture, as we talked about in the past, a minor misstep in something that you say could cost someone their career. And I don't think that's fair. So I try for some of the younger attorneys in my office to give them some tips, but social media is a landmine.
Lisa, our office is becoming obsolete. I mean, you're home, I'm home. Steve, I think you're at the studio, but it's very comfortable working from home.
I agree with you. It's very comfortable for me working from home. I used to not be that way. I don't think that offices are becoming obsolete. I do think that offices are downsizing. I find that offices are starting to utilize outsourcing. For example, an office could, instead of employing IT services, they can outsource their IT services. Some offices can outsource receptionists, and it downsizes the footprint of the space that they need, and it can save the office money. We don't want to become a society where we only see each other through the lens. We need to have a space where we can come together. Although I meet clients for coffee and in restaurants, but offices are downsizing. That was beginning to occur before the pandemic. There's a business called WeWork, where attorneys and other therapists, professionals can share space. It saves the business money, which then ultimately that cost can be, that savings can be shared, and billable rates can go down for the customer. So many of us, like you and I, who enjoy working from home, we thrive working from home. We do a better job working from home. We're happier, we're more efficient. There are attorneys in my office that go to the office every single day. And I say to them, what the hell's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? You're putting on this makeup. You could, but they need that connection.
They need it. They're like old horses. They have to have that certain groove, for lack of a
Yes.
better word.
Yes.
Lisa, what about attorneys and other professionals who want to slow down? Let's start talking about that. We're all gracefully graying, and let's talk about that.
Yeah. And I am starting to, even though I personally, and I'm personally coming into another chapter in my career, and I see the value. I always have, because I'm kind of old school. Every job I've ever had, I attach myself to the older mentors in the office and want to learn from them and get that advice. And I think that employees that have been practicing in their profession for 30 plus years have immense information and lessons that they can share with the younger generation. And there are many of us don't want to be sent out to pasture at the age of 50 or at the age of 65 or 70. We have a lot of things to contribute to society and exercise that brain. I personally think, much of the knowledge, broad knowledge in our society resides within that population of 65 and older. And I love working with individuals that are experts. For attorneys, let's say as an example, if you're an attorney and you're done with the billable hour, it's really demeaning at some point. You're 0.2 for an email. It's like, this ridiculous, it's dumb. So you get burned out, but you have a lot to offer. And so attorneys can move into providing expert assistance. If your field is contracts, you can open up a practice where you provide expert consultation. I am a legal malpractice defense attorney. I also do medical malpractice, as you know. There may come a time when I might want to work as an expert in ethics, and maybe someone would pay me to do that. I don't know. I hope so. But it's a way for me to no longer necessarily bill by the hour, but I can still contribute. Also, most firms in attorneys, I would say most good firms, attorneys can work part-time. If you have value to offer the firm and to clients, why shouldn't we allow you, if you want to work 2 hours a day and draft a brief, or if you want to work 5 hours a day, that's a value to me, to the company, and to the client. Because what someone who's practiced in their industry for 30 years can do in 2 hours takes someone who's just coming out of school 40 hours.
That's a good point.
So cut back, write a book. I have so much I want to do. I'm nowhere near wanting to retire, but there are so many things. Lord, every profession has other areas. I want to teach. I taught before at a small college, and so there are so many things that you can do. You don't just have to, hang it up and just work in your garden every day. If that's what you want to do, that's great. But there's no reason to retire.
Lisa, you've covered a lot of area. Let's talk about another issue, and that is, when I was a young lawyer, we had lawyers who were handshake lawyers, and that meant your word was your bond. You'd shake hands on a deal, and that was it. Are those days gone?
Well, you're probably asking the wrong person, because most attorneys would say that those days are gone. What I say is I exercise my judgment. And I wouldn't advise someone who's practiced law for less than 10 years to exercise their judgment. I say you follow the bright line rule, get it in writing, get a contract. And that's going to be the legal advice. And because you can get burned. I'm actually dealing with a situation right now that involved a loan with no documentation. And then it becomes a question of interpretation for the court. It becomes a costly litigation expense. And so the reason we say get a contract is not because we want to create legal fees the reason I advise to get a contract is because I want to save the client the headache at the end of the day, because people want to be trusting. It's human nature. Good people want to be trusting. Having said that, I've certainly, even as a lawyer, done some things on a handshake. Basically, I'm getting ready to start working out of my new home, even though I'll be working in Las Vegas, in Wisconsin. And the norms in different communities are different. And in dealing with some of the companies there, we haven't signed contracts, for example, for home inspections. We're sending checks. So I think it would be sad, a very, very, very sad day to say that the general rule that the handshake deal is over. I think that a lot of people have the spirit and the ethics to stand behind that mentality of the handshake deal. But lawyers are going to tell you to get big transactions in writing. And that's one of those things where, is the world changing? How has the practice changed in 10 years? It just has. And we're resistant to change. We interpret it as negative because when you think you can't rely on a handshake, it must mean that society as a whole is a big pile of dog doo. You can't rely on a handshake. But I don't believe that. But good legal advice requires a contract. And we have so many forms. People don't know this. There are so many. This is where technology is helpful to the layperson. Anybody that listens to this, you don't need a lawyer for a simple contract. You can literally get one online, or you can call someone like me and I'll give you one for free. If it's a simple deal. Now, I'm not dealing with, the purchase of the MGM Grand here. I'm talking about, some simple transaction.
Lisa, we've talked about scaling back in law and the fact that as we're aging and hopefully gracefully graying, we can practice part-time as lawyers, we can become experts. Will this work in other fields such as, investment advisors, medicine, dentistry, and just to name a few, even in retail sales or marketing?
Absolutely. So you talk about retail sales and marketing. I'll address that later. But most professionals, and when I say professionals, I mean those of us that have a license. A doctor has to have a license to practice medicine. A dentist has to have a license. An attorney has to have a license. A broker has to have a license. Most of those professions have countless areas that can lend and they can lean into after the person gets tired of the day-to-day of practicing law or practicing medicine. And one of the things I talked about being a professor or an instructor, there are businesses that provide continuing education classes. So for attorneys, there are big companies that provide CLEs. So as an attorney, if you're done practicing law, you could teach CLE courses. Those guys make a ton of money. It's insane. Same thing for a doctor. They don't need any advice from me. These doctors have figured out a way to make money hand over fist. They can go in and teach their continuing med education classes, and so can can dentists. So transitioning into education, working part-time, working as a consultant. A lot of doctors are leaving the practice of medicine because of the changes with health insurance in the last 10 to 20 years. So doctors could work as consultants to help other businesses set up their pay billing. Medical billing is a profession in and of itself. Writing books, look at yourself. You're providing an amazing resource to the community with your website, with the books that you have written. You practiced law for many, many years. So I don't think that anybody has to just, like I said, roll over and be done and walk the dog and drink coffee all day. There's so much that you can provide to the community through education and even volunteering. You can provide pro bono services as a doctor, as a lawyer.
That's true. There's so much that can be done. Is there any advice that we haven't covered that you would like to share with our viewers just on this important topic of really setting boundaries, knowing when it's time? You've been in Las Vegas. I mean, knowing when it's time to hold, knowing when it's time to fold, lack of a better word, and just, slowing down, perhaps not retiring, but some final thoughts before we sign off on this issue.
I have a lot of experiences and final thoughts about all those issues, and I'll address the setting boundaries first. It's very, very, very difficult for any young professional to set boundaries. And in fact, they need to a certain extent to pay their dues. I don't think it's wise for some new attorney I'll use to say, I'm only going to work 9 to 5 and then I'm done. I think that sends the wrong message.
Not gonna happen. No.
Yeah. And I don't mean that person doesn't have something to offer, but it sends a message that the person doesn't have the work ethic or the desire or the drive or the focus. So pay your dues early on, but as you develop more experience and you've worked and you've seen you've spent days crying in your office. Not that you've ever done that, Henry, because some client screamed at you or something. You start to realize that there is a lot of power and growth in saying no. As you get more experience, your clients respect you more. So not everyone agrees with me with this, but I don't, a lot of people know, I don't always answer my phone. For many reasons. One, I don't like to play phone tag. Two, I'm always working. I'm in the middle of a brief. I'm on a call. And so if I take another call, then it distracts my attention from the client that deserves 100% of my attention. So I try to schedule calls. So if I get a voicemail, I forward that voicemail to my legal assistant and I say, call that person right away. So that person still knows that they're a priority. They know I've received their voicemail and they are going to get a schedule to talk to me that day or at their convenience. So it's a small little tip that keeps me on focus, but then also sets a boundary so that your day is not constantly interrupted. And what I find with young lawyers is they feel like they have all these balls in the air. And I try to explain, you're doing that to yourself.
We're out of time, but we're always juggling balls. And
yeah.
I agree with you. You say we've got to set limits, but we've got to make our clients feel important.
Yes.
That's key to being successful, whether it's in law, medicine, or accounting, or any other profession. So Lisa Zastrow, I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying. Of course, we'll have more shows with you. And I want to thank our viewers for watching Gracefully Graying.